Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast, episode number 2. I am your host, Dan, and with me today, as always, for 2 episodes, is Rob.
Hello.
Hopefully, I've got the audio right this week, so you should sound a little louder. Um,
I'm sure it'll be fine.
You'll be fine either way. Thank you to all those who are tuning in to watch us talk about Dungeons and Dragons and other associated media. And I hope you enjoy what we have to say. This week we're going to be running for a slightly shorter amount of time. We're still experimenting with the length of the podcast and sort of maintaining viewership across various platforms as well. Which does remind me that if you haven't already, follow us on all the socials that we're on. So on Twitter, on Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube.
I
But
assume we have the same name everywhere.
we have the same name everywhere, except there's a C missing on Twitter because of character length. So instead, we're awkwardly big die is what we are. So, without further ado, we can jump into talking about what we want to talk about, and I think we'll start with one of our topics of the week, is as we talked about it last week, and that is spell of the week, where we discuss some of our favorite or preferred spells, some that are a little controversial, some that are mainstays among various classes. Last week we talked about Synaptic Static and Counterspell. And Rob, why don't you lead us off with what you have to talk about this week?
Yeah, so a level 5 spell last week. And again, I'm going to go with level 5 spell this week. I think level 9 character spellcasters is the sweet spot for me. I am a particular fan of the spell Animate Objects. Now, Animate Objects, what that will do for you, it does look a bit of a complex spell when you're reading it, but it essentially boils down to you can uh, I magically or telekinetically animate several inanimate objects around you. They could be anything from tiny objects like pebbles, stones, or a dice, or a fragment of bone, or a dagger, up to large, I believe, is the max size. The bigger the objects, the fewer you can animate at a time. I
Huge.
think huge, yes. So is it just one huge spell object you can
Let's have
animate?
a look.
To say huge,
Just say huge. I hadn't read it.
yeah.
I saw what it said. It said huge.
But yes,
Spot on.
the reason I'm less familiar with the larger objects to animate is I tend to favour animating many smaller objects and essentially summoning somewhat of a swarm of daggers to fling at my enemies. It's an interesting spell because it's very efficient in terms of action economy. Because once you have animated those items, they all start with an amount of HP dependent on the size of the object, starting at 20 HP for a tiny object like a dagger or a stone or a tooth, and 80 HP for a huge object like what would you class as a huge object? Something like a
Massive statue.
yeah,
Like
statue,
depending on the
small shed.
universe you're in, like a car.
I
Like
was thinking, I was literally thinking of like a wheelie bin or something.
yeah.
But yeah, a
Even a
fantasy
wheelie
wheelie
bin
bin.
isn't like it's like
That's
medium,
probably
right?
large, medium large maybe. And yeah, it's just really interesting because they can grow legs and run around, or they can float or fly. Um, you could be someone who animates a small collection of carvings, whatever flavor you want to spin on it. It's a really fun spell. It gives you lots of things to do, and as a bonus action, so you can still do your normal action. As a bonus action each turn, you can command those items to assault the target that you wish them to assault, attack the target you wish them to attack. They have an AC value, which changes depending on the size, a strength value, and a dexterity value. So what I particularly am a fan of doing is walking up with essentially a duffel bag full of knives, making them all fly around me in a big swarm. Knives are really good because although the damage they deal is the smallest. Oh, let's say knives. Tiny objects are really good.
Mm.
So the damage they deal is the smallest. There's a lot of them. So each one you can attack once with, and it would be a +8 to hit, and the damage would be 1d4 +4.
Mm.
And usually it's the spell says to apply the appropriate type of damage, so bludgeoning or piercing or slashing, depending on what you have animated. And in daggers, it would be piercing.
Yeah, so it's a bit like
The-
having a magic missile that is always active. Well, not always, as long as it concentrate is active
Yeah,
and hitting its target. Obviously not automatic, but the same amount of damage and a similar number of
even
or
more damage than
possibly
magic
more.
missile.
Yeah.
It's +4, not +1, which
Mm.
is what makes it so crazy in my opinion. It's got uh, if every tiny object hits, assuming you've animated all 10, that's a minimum damage of 50 and a maximum damage of 80, which for a bonus action, that's pretty good.
It's hefty.
And
That's
then
hefty.
on when you're considering on top of that, you could also be slinging single action spells like Fireball, like Scorching Ray, like Magic Missile just mentioned, or you could be, if you were the right kind of class with the right mix of spells, you could be doing support spells whilst attacking with these. So it's a very versatile spell. I've had a lot of fun with it over many different characters. I've shiftily looking over at Dan killed players with it. Um, when I'm DMing, well,
You
I
have.
say the final blow was dealt by something else, but I think the
Yeah.
animate object spell was pretty decisive.
It was the largest contributor to the death of my character. Yes,
Yeah, knocked you right out of the sky
did.
with 10 floating razor sharp shards of skull. Yeah, that was fun. I've used it as a player several times. I was once as a warlock in like a large mausoleum battling a sorceress, and I animated 10 medium-sized sarcophagus stone lids and basically just flung them around like huge things, battering them. Um, it's a very satisfying spell, very fun to play with, and that's probably why it's one of my absolute favorite spells.
It is. In my experience, I've never actually wielded it myself. However, having been on the other end of it on two occasions with Rob, um, once as mentioned previously, when when a particular BBG we may have discussed in the past uh, used it against me, and then slightly more recently, I think, or was it during? It might have been. I don't know. You used it when you played a Blade Singer, didn't you, to
I
assist you
did, yeah.
with
Yeah, Summer Starshard
Soma.
cast it when he was battling a star spawn atop a floating skyship,
You were.
which
That
again was
sounds
very.
epic, doesn't it? Really.
It,
It
it was pretty epic. Yeah,
was pretty
it was
cool.
an epic situation to be fighting in.
I missed a
Very, very
battle,
fun.
like a sky battle as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was more of the backdrop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like there was two skyships battling it out. We were hoping to save one, but we had to deal with something on our ship. But we are going down a tangent there. I do just want to circle back to the spell before I start reminiscing. There is, for the DMs out there, it's not the perfect spell. There are ways to deal with it. As I mentioned already, if you were paying attention, you'd have heard that each of the items has hit points. So if you do animate 10 small objects, yes, they will be pretty scary for anybody who is facing down 10 animated knives or whatever it is you choose to animate, marbles, coins, teeth. Uh, the wizard in one of my other campaigns recently animated 10 skulls and they just laughingly
Oh, that
gnawed
is
something to death.
a funny
Yeah, that was
image. I love the image.
he's a necromancer and
Great. Yeah.
um, he'd been saving that for a while. None of us had noticed him picking up skulls, but he just pulled up in his trench coat, flasher style, and just let the skulls go, and it was it was fun. Um, but yeah, any area of effect spell will quite easily deal with a cloud of knives. You only have to deal 20 damage to them. They do have decent dexterity, but even a good fireball, if they succeed the test, the check, the save, could still do sizable damage, and they've only
Yeah.
got 20 HP. or any other kind of thing. Like if they're attacking something that has an AoE aura effect, like a creature that or a cleric that may have summoned spectral guardians or spirit guardians, I should say, or something like that.
Should call it
They're going to
Spectral
get whittled
Guardians
away.
when you do necrotic damage. Should switch the name.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so there are ways to deal with it, and you can also hit the caster with some sizable damage, either killing them or knocking their concentration. Both of those will be very effective in getting rid of the swarm of daggers that could be flying towards you at any minute.
Hmm.
So it's good, but it can make you a target.
It can. Yes. Well, shall I give you my spell of the week?
Go for it.
You know, I hadn't even decided as I pressed the record button, so I had to decide while you were talking. Um, I've been busy preparing for our new campaign that starts tomorrow, which is why I didn't do any preparation. I haven't prepared too much for the podcast, but I had things ready.
I'll let you
I thought about it. I want to go with I want to say the opposite end of the power scale. I'm going to go with the Silvery Barbs. It's from Strixhaven. It's from the Strixhaven book. So it's a relatively new addition to the catalogue of Dungeons and Dragons spells. Um, I think it's very thematic for a bard, because obviously a barb is an insult. I think that really works well with things along the side of things like vicious mockery and dissonant whispers and things like that. Obviously, sorcerers can use it and wizards can use it as well. So your typical arcane casters all can do it along with your jack of all trades bard. But to explain what it is also, as last week I chose another reaction spell, because there aren't many and I do like a good reaction spell,
you
because
do.
it's just, you keep it in the pocket, like, it's really good just to be there. You're not worried about, like, might keep a spell slot aside, but you're not worried uh, about about swapping them out, because you're always going to have them in your catalog
Is it
if
a
you're smart
level
about it.
one spell or is it a level two
It's a
spell?
level 1 spell.
So it's just you're going to have the most slots available to cast it.
Yeah.
It's such a good spell for that.
Yeah. Well, basically, what it is basically it's a reroll on the d20, triggered uh, by a creature. It's pretty much what it is. So if you read the description, it's you magically distract the triggering creature and turn its momentary uncertainty into encouragement for another creature. The triggering creature must reroll the d20 and use the lower roll. Like, it's simply just making another creature, whether it attacks you, whether it's a creature that is attacking, and you want to do it on that to stop it from hurting your ally, or you want to do it on your friend to give him another shot, um, or you want to not give him another shot. You want to make sure they don't hit if you're trying to be more evil. I don't know what evil is the right word, but you're trying to be mischievous.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
bit of a joke. Does it
a
work
bit of a
on?
joke.
So it works on attacks we've covered. Does it work on things like saves and checks?
It doesn't say. It works on a d20 roll. To
Oh, so that would
re-roll the
typically
d20.
apply for all of them then.
But what it also does is you can give a chosen creature advantage on their next attack roll, ability check, or saving throw. Um, the next one it makes within a minute. Um,
So
come.
not only are you distracting someone that might be about to hit you or might need to save against a spell that you've just cast against them or someone else has just cast against them, but you can also give somebody else on, who I suppose would say was on your side of the battlefield, um, a boost to the next thing they, pardon me, the next thing they attempt.
Yeah, basically,
It's a lot of mileage out of a level one spell.
it is a lot of mileage, and I can understand why a lot of DMs don't like it. Because it usually means the DM is re-rolling. It's rare that it's going to be play. Like, I can only think of one circumstance, and it's the one that popped up when I spoke before, of if you have a player that's going to do something that the rest of the party don't particularly want them to do or agree with. For example, attacking the BBG when he's in the middle of his monologue. Um,
Well, we know how that ends.
we know how that story ends. See last week's podcast where we run down Strahd quite a lot. We talk about Strahd a lot.
We will. We always will, I think.
We always will. It's one of the best campaigns we've played. At least from my perspective, and I would hope from yours perspective.
Yeah. I wouldn't agree to run it again for a different group if I wasn't enjoying it or if I didn't enjoy it. So yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I can confirm when playing as the DM uh, in the Curse of Strahd campaign and other one shots, other sessions, other various things, Silvery Barbs. Even though you know your players have got it, you always forget it's there and it always catches you out. It is frustrating, but it also makes for some funny scenes. Um, it definitely helped generate the animosity that existed between your wizard Emmerich and Strahd. You were doing many things to upset him, to piss him off. You countered his spells. You silvery barbed him whenever he was successfully attacking people, which is a good thing to do because he does a lot of damage. You were a divination wizard, so you had what's that thing I always forget the name of?
Portent.
Potten? Potten?
Yeah,
Potten,
Portent.
yeah, where you can just change the role as well. So, yeah, a lot of tools. Silvery Barbs was in the forefront of ways to piss Strahd off.
Yeah. By the way, as a bit of an amendment, it does actually tell you when you can use it. It's just in italics with a little asterisk at the bottom in tiny writing on the description that I'm looking at. It says which you take when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself succeeds on an attack roll, ability check, or a saving throw. So you have to succeed, and it has to be on one of those three things, which
That makes
covers
sense with it being a reaction
pretty
as well.
much every single D20 roll.
Yeah. So you're waiting for the DM to cheer in their success, having completed or successfully saved against the spell, and then you just be like, no, 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 try again.
Basically, yeah, yeah. It's great for certain circumstances, and though it's not a guarantee, again, it's not like a guarantee that you are not going to get hit, or that the enemy's going to make their save or succeed in what they're trying to do, or ally if you're looking to prevent an ally from doing something. But it is a very useful spell. It's first level. It's a reaction. It's got good range, 60 feet. Is a great range, and it's also got one component, and that is a verbal. Which means you can do it with your hands tied behind your back.
There is something I just noticed then as well as you said, quite important about its range is I think the one thing that almost keeps it fair, keeps it honest in a way, is the 60-foot range. So
Mm.
you're always in the range of counterspell.
That is true as well. Yeah.
That's good to know from a DM's perspective, or a player's perspective. If the DM starts silvery barbs in you, which I don't know. I think I would feel a bit mean doing that to my players
Yeah, I
sometimes.
tend not to focus too much on magic with monsters or
Mm,
enemies, because there's plenty of monsters with lots and lots of different abilities and features that you don't need them. And there is something to be said. I think there's an argument about the changes from say the Monster Manual Volos to Monster of the Multiverse,
mm,
and that they took out spell lists from
mm,
most of the actual monsters, so liches and arch mages and stuff like that do have them. They took out the spell list, even with some like once a day things that they can do, once a day spells, and then they
yeah,
give them like an equivalent feature. So like the warlocks still have a version of Eldritch Blast. It's not called Eldritch
right.
Blast, but it's a very similar thing, and it simplifies a lot of it, taking away that choice. Because when you're a DM, and especially if you've got multiple monsters going, and you've got a decent sized part, and you've got a lot going on, just be able to go do that thing that they can do.
Yeah,
It is simpler. It does take away the options, but it really doesn't. As I think we talked about a little bit last week, like you can just be flexible and do what you like.
yeah. No,
You
that
can
makes
have
sense.
them use a spell if you want them to. It's not. It's your game. Do what you like.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. And that's also the thing with, I suppose, Monsters of the Multiverse. It is like a newer version of Volos and Mordenkainen's. So if you wanted to use the old stuff, it's still there. You can still find it.
Yeah, I still use a lot of. I like to look at both. Luckily, D&D Beyond, one of the main tools that I use, you can look at both. And often,
Mm.
if you're looking up a spell, it will have a spell, but because spells aren't, there's not really any changes there. If you look up at a monster, you can see them side by side, and just go, okay, because
Oh,
they'll be next to each other generally, or near each other in the list.
oh,
There's
and when
always
you've searched for
a
one, of course, with this
yeah.
shared name. Yeah.
Or if you're looking through a list of monsters, there'll be a bit of difference. There might be like a slight variance in their power level. I've never seen one that has changed. Its CR's changed. They've
No.
always kept them the same challenge rating.
So you should get roughly the same level of impact
Yes,
on a combat
I think they just
scenario, I imagine.
simplified it a little,
Hmm.
which is what we all kind of want a little bit sometimes. But don't always get. Should we do monsters? Since we're kind of in that
Yeah,
range.
talking about monsters. Next segment, I think these are going to be a running theme, Monster of the Week. Last week we introduced it as monsters we would like to use but haven't. Um,
Hmm.
my option is definitely still staying true to that. Do you want me to go first, as I did with the spells?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
So my almost embarrassing admission as a DM that has DM'd Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition for probably 6 years or so now, is I don't really use dragons very often, if at all. There's particular subset that I've literally never used, and that's ancient dragons. So I thought I'd go with the classic, the ancient red dragon. Now, I don't really have a defense for the reason that I've not used dragons very much, other than we all like to be a little bit different and we all like to be a little bit creative. And I think sometimes, because it's in the name, it's literally Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
we tend to go towards other things. I think I noticed that. I think that is a bit of a stereotype. But really, I don't see why, because actually, dragons are really cool. As somebody who was a very long-standing Magic the Gathering player long before I got into D&D, I loved playing a red-green dragons deck. They're always big, stompy creatures. Same in D&D. One of the things that I love about dragons in particular um, is the impact they have on the environment. So if you were to open the monster manual and just read the sections that there are, there's like a big thick section on dragons, as you would expect,
Hmm.
because it's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Um, Not only do they have lair actions, which we covered last week when we were talking about the Beholder, and I talked about how I love lair actions because they just give such a rich narrative to the map and things that can happen. Pardon me, I've got a bit of a cough tonight. But they also have regional effects, and these will happen miles around when there is an ancient dragon of whatever color that you want to use. Obviously, I'm focusing on red dragons. So the region containing a legendary red dragon's lair is warped by the dragon's magic, which creates one or more of the following effects. As the DM, you get to choose. It's your world that you're building if you're going homebrew, or if you're going on book. I'm sure the book will make it more specific, but small earthquakes are common within 6 miles of the dragon's lair. Water sources within 1 mile of the lair are supernaturally warm and tainted with the smell of sulfur. Rocky fissures within 1 mile of the dragon's lair form portals to the elemental plane of fire, allowing creatures of elemental fire into the world to dwell nearby. And if the dragon dies, because the players have defeated it, these effects fade over the course of the next 1d10 days. There is lots and lots of things that you could do there and use to really build a whole narrative around for an adventure. If you wanted to run a small campaign where a group of adventurers or dragon hunters or whatever you decide want to go and slay a dragon ultimately, and they're having to deal with an invasion of fire elementals and other creatures that spew forth from the plane of fire. There's quite a wealth of creatures you could use there. Um, you know, or there could be a, a local monarch that could use a slumbering red dragon, take advantage of the fact that it's opening planar portals to the realm of fire to heat a load of local hot springs and generate a kind of, I suppose, income out of that, and make a name for the region as having the best hot springs, the best sulfuric pools to while away your
Who would
worries and
do
stresses.
something like that?
I know that's definitely not an example that I'm pulling from something that you've DM'd or anything along those lines. And there certainly wasn't a dragon that we were aware of if that was the case.
No, no.
But it's certainly something that worked and would be cool. Pardon me. And then on top of that, you've got lair actions, which again, really fun. But then let's not beat about the bush. We want to get to the actual creature. It's a big. And when I say big,
Large as it can be.
it's gargantuan, chaotic evil. So you can decide how chaotic that is. Dragons are good because they can be creatures that just want to exist and hoard wealth and very much Smaug vibes, live on that hoard of gold and be left alone, but the effect on the environment draws people to come and claim that gold. Or you can make them quite an aggressive chaotic evil that wants to engage in conquest and reigns of terror and obtain power. Um, very strong, 30 strength. I don't think I've ever seen much higher than that. A con of
No.
29. Other stats, not much dex, but plenty of intelligence, very smart creatures, lots of charisma, some wisdom. It's got pretty solid saving throws. It's got over 500 hit points if you just take the box standard average hit points. But if you decided to roll it yourself, to roll the hit points of an ancient red dragon, you're looking at 28 d20s plus 252. It's going to have a lot of HP. It's going to be hard to take down. It can fly 80 feet. It can climb 40 feet. It can move on the ground 40 feet. It's very fast, very difficult to get away from. Standard things apply. Legendary resistances 3 a day. When you're fighting something that's challenge rating 24, you expect it to
Mhm.
have at least 3 legendary resistances. Although that Elder Brain Dragon that you brought up last week had 4. That's
Mhm.
scary. As you would expect, it's got the usual things. It's got a huge fire breath, 90-foot cone, dealing an average of 91 damage, or if you feel like rolling a load of dice, especially if you're a Warhammer player, you might have 26 d6. Not many players will have 26 d6. I think you might need to be a 40k player or a Warhammer Age of Sigmar player to have that amount of d6, or just
Or a
really like.
dice goblin, yeah.
I'll be a dice goblin, or maybe just really enjoy twin casting fireball, because that's allowed. Um, so yeah, it's going to absolutely roast the players. It's got a frightful presence with a 120-foot reach, a DC Wisdom saving throw of 21, so it's not for the faint-hearted. Um, it attacks using its frightful presence, then makes 3 attacks, 1 with its bite and 2 with its claws. So it's got a plus a plus 17 to hit, a reach of 15 feet. It does 2d10 plus 10 piercing damage plus 14 or 4d6 fire damage for its bite, for its claws. Slightly less, but not by much. It's got a tail attack as a legendary action, which it has 3 legendary actions. It can simply choose to detect players that are hiding stealthily with a wisdom perception check. Pretty classic. It's got the tail attack, or it's got a wing attack, which costs 2 legendary actions and can
Yeah.
cause the players to need to pass a DC 25 dexterity saving throw or take a load of bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. Which, again, considering the creature's movement, is interesting, considering it takes you half your movement to get up.
Yeah.
So, all in all, I suppose the reason I've never used an ancient red dragon is probably because I've never had players strong enough to take it on.
It's again,
Um,
it's a it's a BBG, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the
it's
it is the it is a boss fight. It is an epic creature. Regional effects are a layer of and actions and all that are telltale signs of that. But the regional effects are great. I didn't even realize I'd never gone that high with any dragon that I've played.
yeah.
Legendary actions are a mainstay for anything over a certain power level,
Mm.
which is great. Yeah, it's a terrifying creature, much like the dragon we talked about last week, but for a different reason. This one's just gonna cook you. Um, I would agree. I think there's some great examples of use in D&D popular culture with the likes of Critical Role and their animated show, where you can see the red dragon and you see the the regional effects that it has and these layer actions come into play and things like that. It is Yeah, they're pretty terrifying creatures. Like they're not the smartest of dragons, ancient red dragons. I think green dragons are the smartest ones, but it is
Still
without
smart though with 18 intelligence though, isn't it?
that's still smart. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But it is a very terrifying creature, and it's like you said it's not got much dex going for it. Well, that's kind of good because it's a big, huge creature. But again, it still has saving throw proficiencies in dex and also a +7 in stealth. So I don't think it's going to be using that sort of stuff to kill its enemies, but it does mean that you still got to be aware if you're wandering through maybe a large cavern where it's particularly hot.
Yeah, for sure. I just love like all those tools, like we've said, the regional effects, the layer effects, just all build a story. And I think, like you've said already, they build the story culminating in an epic encounter. And I think that's
Yes.
what I love about them. So now I want to use one.
Yeah, using it's definitely a thing that dragons are not as common because maybe perhaps because it's in the title. People go, oh, that's a bit like of a stereotype. But everyone does dragons, and probably you find a lot of people don't do a lot of dragons.
Mm,
I've done little bits of dragons. I've used mostly just young dragons.
yeah,
I've used a young green dragon, and I've used young white dragons. I kind of use another type of dragon, but I won't count that as using it as an enemy or as an encounter. My young white dragons, were a pair that were disturbed and killed or downed pretty much the entire party, bar our
yeah, that was nearly a
sorcerer,
TPK.
and actually devoured one of our players, tore him
Yeah.
in twain. In twain? In half.
Twin.
They ate him. Like, they ate him.
Yeah. It was definitely grim.
Well, yes.
The player was called Grim. That was a joke.
Yeah. Well, the character was grim. The play wasn't go grim.
Potato, tomato.
Okay. But yes, uh, definitely worthy of Monster of the Week. Now on to my Monster of the Week.
So what have you picked?
I have picked a also similarly terrifying creature. I assume people often associate with fire as well. Coming deep from the bowels of hell, or the nine hells, or sometimes not even the bowels. I mean, they do wander in Avernus and fight through the eternal blood war and command the legions there. And that is, I have gone for Fiends because we love really difficult high challenge rating monsters. These fellas, whilst they don't have the same lovely regional effects and layer actions that the Ancient Red Dragon does, there are, I believe, two variations. You can get one which is a summoner variation. You've seen with some other
Mm.
monsters, it just means that they have the ability to summon something. And some monsters do have that variation. But simply put, a pit fiend is the top devil outside of arch fiends. The dukes of hell are the only ones who really outrank or outpower Pit Fiend. There's lots of lore you can read on them, lots of lore. I dived into them because I did sort of use them in my last campaign, though I never directly. I still always wanted to have my players directly fight them. I just know that they weren't powerful enough to fight a Pit Fiend, so I used
Definitely not.
variations, and I think also mentioned last week that I had a guy who was possessed by one, so we had some of the traits,
Mm.
but not exclusive. But they are large, which is not gargantuan, so they could ride the dragon. But I don't think the dragon would take to that too kindly. Epic fight though, epic fight. They can fly, got great 60-foot fly movement. Slower on the ground, so the likelihood is they're going to be in combat a little airborne.
Yeah.
They have loads and loads of resistances. They don't. They have a few resistances. They have the common resistance that you expect with sort of high level monsters. There's sort of the bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from the magical attacks. Though silver is the thing that gets through this. Um, and they are resistant, surprisingly, to cold. But then there are parts of hell in D&D lore, in the Forgotten Realms lore, that are particularly cold. With Levistus's particular layer of hell being a bit chilly, being that the man himself is frozen deep within the ice. They have two immunities: fire and poison. Poison, of
Classic.
course, because everything has to have poison resistance, making poison spells pretty much redundant in most of D&D, unfortunately. Unless that's something you really want to focus on, that's something you need to speak to your dungeon master about. Generally
Yeah.
speaking, it's a bit of a workaround to be able to ensure that nothing has it, or at least
So many things are immune to poison.
a lot.
It's just, yeah.
Um, because resistance is one thing, right? It's half damage, but it's not great. But immunity, unfortunate, which also means it can't be poisoned either.
Mm.
I also really love creatures with true sight. I
Oh
think
yeah, of course.
it's a great little feature because even the old ancient red doesn't have true sight. He has blind sight, so he can smell you, I suppose, hear you around him.
Yeah.
But the pit fiend has true sight, which means he can see everything. There is nothing that I don't want to call it he because I don't know, but I do. It has
Was the picture has pecs, but yeah.
yeah. I think they probably are non-binary. I think they don't have gender. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't know the lore enough.
Whatever the DM wants is
Whatever the
whatever it
DM
is.
wants, that is true. That is very true. But true sight's great because if players are gonna be like you're trying to use invisibility and stuff like that to get around them, gonna see you. Doesn't matter because true sight's great like that. You don't. These guys are great as basically if you were doing like if you're doing a higher level campaign, you wanted like some really good bodyguards for some arch-fiend,
Yeah, these are the
then
ones.
pit fiends are a great shout because nothing gets past the pit fiend. Um, well, it's got alright wisdom, so its perception is decent. Though it doesn't have any
Hmm.
skill proficiencies itself.
I'm surprised by how clever they are. That's 22 intelligence. That's
Hmm.
a lot higher than I expected for a pit fiend.
Well,
I
pit
don't know why. I think
fiends are
I just,
the generals
well, yeah,
supposedly of Hell's armies, and devils are notoriously tricksters
they
and
are.
cunning, and they use their minds to trap people into packs and things like that. So it's
Mm.
definitely something you don't get to the top of the hierarchy by not being smart and outwitting your opponents.
That is true. That is, I think that's, I think what it is that classic thing of people mixing up demons and devils in D&D,
Mm,
and the pit fiend looks very much like that classic depiction of a devil, and it's also incredibly hench. So you
yes.
tend to have that stereotype in the back of your mind where you think big, huge, brawny thing, not smart, but that'll surprise you. Very, very clever.
Yeah, yeah. It is. It also, well, another thing to add on to why it's interesting is auras. I like auras in general. I think they're really
Mm.
interesting because they generally work without an action, so it's just something that occurs, and that is it has a fear aura, which basically means that any creature that is hostile to the pit fiend within 20 feet has to make a wisdom saving throw. And on a fail, it's frightened. And if it successes, it gets that immunity, which I sometimes really
Mm.
don't like about. I think it. I think it's good to sometimes ignore that immunity if you succeed, because it
Yeah,
keeps the aura present within the encounter.
I would
Uh,
maybe give them advantage against it for a round if they succeed or something along those
mm,
lines. Yeah, because I see they get over the effect, but to be immune for an entire day, I don't know. That feels like a bit much.
agreed. Agreed. It has its usual magic resistances and stuff. Don't need to go through everything, and it's got lots of things to hit you with. It can make up to 4 attacks with a bite, a claw, a mace, and a tail attack. So it hits you with every part of his body that it's got available, except for its wings, because it's using those to keep it afloat. I would imagine is how most DMs. It's how I would
I,
play it. I'd have him flying around. Like when I had the closest thing to a pit fiend that I've used, he flew around
he
because
did.
flight is great.
Not to mention, I'm seeing those spells like you said, that kind of reduced spell list, but
Hmm.
at will, fireball at
Hmm.
will. That's
Hmm.
I know it's only a level 3 spell technically, but we know
At will.
it,
Yeah,
it's yeah.
no limit.
That's good. I mean, I hope there's nobody called Will in your party. Put it that way. Then there's 3 a day, Hold Monster, and Wall of Fire. Both very powerful spells for very different reasons. Just straight up paralyzing somebody, or making a really well divided battlefield by lighting half of it on fire,
That's
or
what I really
put
like
it.
about those wall spells is that they're great for splitting up
Mm,
parties. You see me do it.
yep.
Because I think it creates an interesting dynamic within a battle. And with your big fella here being immune to fire, he can wander through his own firewall without his own wall of fire without any bother, whereas the players are likely to have an issue with that wall.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think the beauty of this stat block, the beauty of this creature is obviously it's already steeped in its own lore.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a really good framework because one of the things that I can see that it's missing is the what we kind of associate it with boss fight, BBEG fights,
Mhm.
legendary resistances, legendary actions, that sort of thing. And it's a pit fiend doesn't have a like its own name as such,
Mhm.
but you could just add all that to make it
That's good.
a BBEG, and it's something that I think would be very easy to tack on because it's already a challenge rating 20 creature, huge HP. Yeah, it's not quite got that gargantuan size and the 500 plus HP of the ancient red dragon, but you could tweak some of those numbers and add the legendary resistances and
Mhm.
legendary actions and
Yeah.
very easily serve the if you're homebrewing an archdevil, this is a good place to start.
Mhm. Indeed, I agree. I think it's also great to get a monster that is that powerful that doesn't have those as well. Because you can also then dumb it down if you want without having to
Yeah.
worry about are you taking too much away from it. Dumb it down, I mean basically reduce its difficulty.
Yes, give it some padding.
Yeah. And then if you want to know anyone wants to know about the summoner version, um, it can summon bearded devils, barb devils, or an Aaron Yes, which is a like a hell angel. Aaron Yes. All of which I think bearded, barbed, and a Aaron Yes I threw at my plays in my last campaign. I think I threw them at you. I think I threw every one of them. Because Bearded Devils
You did, yeah.
you briefly fought towards the end, same as Eren, yes. And then there was a Barb Devil that popped up a few times.
Was the Aaron Yes the thing that strung Narakis up by his neck?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I do remember that now.
because
Yeah,
it
that
gets
was
the rope.
again true sight.
Yeah.
As I was doing a little bit of as Narakis, my Leonin artificer, I was doing a bit of scouting ahead whilst invisible, trying to be careful. Um, he didn't have a clue that an Erinyes was there
No, why would
above
you?
him in the rafters of that ruin, and he didn't know. Even if he had seen it, he would have still thought that he was invisible, he was safe, because he didn't have that kind of knowledge. And all of a sudden, this kind of lasso just lynches him by the neck, yanks him up, and all the players who are hiding, or player characters who are hiding in a nearby ruined house, kind of waiting for my say. As we were on teams, just seeing everybody else's faces just burst into panic. Even though my character was the one that was threatened in that moment, I still loved that because it was just so funny to see everybody's reactions.
It was. It's just this automatic. Oh no, get in there! What have we done? We made a mistake. We should let him go on his own.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, because it is kind of weird though to send your artificer to go and do the scouting. It's not a common thing
We,
that you do, really.
we
If
didn't
there,
really have
but you didn't. You had a rogue early on, but she stopped playing, so there's no rogue anymore.
didn't have a ranger.
The
The
only
druid
thing,
didn't really do that kind of thing.
no, yeah, the druid's the only one you might use because of wild shape. But then if you're, I suppose the spores druid wants to save
Yeah,
those wild shapes for other things. You're not going to be using that. A moon druid would and could.
yeah.
Uh, but that is Pit Fiend is and was a monster of the week. So, I we've talked longer than I had originally thought we had. Uh, Time
Easily
flies
done.
when you're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, so we will skip the next topic because that's one we can cover, and we do on and off anyway. So we
Mm,
can skip DM versus playing, and we will go on to the little bit of news that will then feed into the final topic. And the little bit of news I had was I was interested because I thought, right, we don't the Dungeons and Dragons tabletop games, there isn't a lot of big news, at least easily accessible finding news. A lot of the stuff that isn't considered news is like releases. So you might find that sort of stuff on Kickstarter or on Wizard of the Coast on website or D&D Beyond, these sort of places where they talk about what's been released. Nothing's been released this week or recently because there's been some releases already this year.
yeah.
And I imagine a lot of focus is being put on to what the piece of news that I located is about, which is actually about Baldur's Gate 3.
Oh, right.
And there's been a number of interviews around Baldur's Gate, and this is not a negative thing. This is a positive thing to some degree. It depends on how you take it. But Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have a what some would consider a key spell from Dungeons and Dragons, and that is Dispel Magic.
Oh, does it not?
There is no Dispel Magic in Baldur's Gate 3. I even looked for it because I think I could take that because the enemies like to use stuff against me
Yeah, they
that would be
do.
really useful with, and that was precisely why they cut it out because apparently it would double the size of the game to include that one spell,
Yeah,
according to
because you've
what I
got to
read on
have the
PC
ability to.
Gamer.
Every spell would have to have the coding for the dispel magic mechanic built into it, I imagine. So, like,
Yeah, it's also the fact that
yeah,
there's so many little story things that could just be solved by Dispel Magic.
that's true.
Like,
Yeah,
it's not. It wouldn't be possible. There's an early game thing which a lot of people have seen, where you first meet Gale and he's inside that thing. You could either, if you wanted to dispel magic, and that little portal that he's in is gone.
I did think of that when I remember finding him. What did I do? I did an Arcana check to
Hmm.
kind of lessen it, being the warlock that I am, um, and then yanked him out. Which is probably a
100%.
good thing that I had the Arcana to back it up because my wet noodle arms would not have been able to yank him out otherwise.
If you see my character, then the little gnome wizard with the white hair and long beard, no chance. He's got a little gnome. No way. Um, But no, yeah, more to stick to the point a little bit was that they've claimed it would double the size of the game because of everything you would have to every story point they would have to be covered by it. And I think there was some discussion in the article, I think it was on PC Gamer that I read, that discussed why they or wondered why they hadn't tried a light version of it, so a
Mm,
simplified version of it, one that had a lot more specific wording to it
yeah.
than the actual Dispel Magic does have. So, like for example, I don't know if you've tried or I've never tried. I just read about it because it was in this article. But the fly spell, right? You don't fly. It's more like you get these long hops, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, it's not quite flying up and down. Flying about, creating not quite the 3D space that you would want. But it's essentially a simplified version of that spell.
Yeah.
And I was curious to why they. I agree with the article actually as to why they didn't try a slightly simplified version that was just something along the lines of only affects spells, for example.
Mm,
Like it can dispel an active spell. So if someone was to cast, what's one of the most effective ones that I've noticed in the game would be something like silence, right?
yes.
Dispel magic would be great against that. If it was just specifically for spells to counter those, but I know you can counterspell, but to get rid of that effect on the area, I don't think that'd be as big an issue. But then I haven't played the entire game, so I don't know if there's anything further down the line.
That's true. Yeah. I think that does bring my mind to one of the sides of Baldur's Gate now that I am able to play it on PS5
Yep.
because my PC is a little old. Um, I I think putting anything in the game like that when it is based on dice rolls and luck, but also has the ability to save the game and reload the game. Yeah, I can see the potential for that to be ultimate save scumbait.
Hmm.
So I can understand why they won't put it in. Perhaps they were perhaps they were intending to make a simplified version, but honestly, they'd made us wait long enough for the game anyway that it just wasn't one of the things that made it in.
Yeah, I just wonder if it was the because there's certain things in the game that I don't know how far you got, but for example, there's a bit where there is a like a shadow curse.
I think that's the area I'm just
I've
going into Act Two.
I've just got into that area basically,
Yeah,
and the shadow curse kind of acts like an effect on the body,
yeah,
and I wonder if having something like a dispel magic, if that curse is actually programmed to be act like a spell, that then a
yeah.
dispel magic would interfere with that. Whereas they've already got
Mm.
like remove curse, which works on it. Tested it, it works on it.
Ah, okay, okay.
I had a scroll, so I used it.
You get a lot of scrolls
Get
in
a
BG3.
lot of scrolls. Oh my! I got so many. As a wizard, it's great, but like my coin goes down quick because of that.
Mine
There's a lot of
doesn't. I don't
scrolls.
have anything to spend money on because every trader I find doesn't really have that much. I just buy all the magic arrows and that's it.
I spend my money on health potions for Asterion and oh, yesterday scrolls of Revivify for Asterion because that guy goes down a lot in my playthrough. A
How
lot.
does it?
Like nobody has died more than Asterion. I tell you that. And yesterday I did a bit of a boss fight in Grimforge where against a giant robot, and my character, my player character, Adoy, the gnome wizard, and the conjured elementals, the ice methods that he had, were the only things standing at the end.
Nice.
Everything else had
Conjure
been
Minor Elementals. That
killed.
was nearly my spell of the week.
Really? Yeah, it's a good
Yeah,
spell.
because basically I like things that give you a lot of
Mm.
attacks.
Save my ass. That they did that. Those little flying fairy ice fellas
Mm.
definitely saved my ass. Um, because of the mechanics of how that fight works. Which I don't know if you've done that fight. No, in the Grim Forge, in the actual Adamantium Forge.
No,
No.
I
Yeah.
must not have found it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a bit of a pain, a bit of a puzzle to find it. We'll talk about it in
I
more
found,
detail off stream, but
yeah, just
there
to
is a
not go
boss.
spoilers.
When you activate it to use it for the first time, it goes into a cutscene that's some and there's a boss, and he's
Right.
got like a lot of hit points, like 300 hit points. He also has so many resistances, and at certain points during the fight, he has immunity to pretty
Okay.
much to
Okay.
everything. Um, everything. But
A
you,
good
we'll
old puzzle
talk about
fight.
it. Um, but why don't we give our opinions so far? I don't neither of us we're about the same place. I thought you were a little ahead of me, but I think I might be a little ahead of you now. I played it very late last night. It's probably why I'm
You do
feeling
like
under
to
the
stay
weather.
up late. A nerd hangover
Nerd
from being up
hangover.
all night playing video games. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I would say um, I ex it's hit about as well as I expected with me. Um, it's almost an impossible feat to turn something as complex as Dungeons and Dragons into um, a legitimate video game experience, but they have really done a good job of it.
Yeah.
There are things that have slightly confused me at times because they've actually changed some rules here and
Mhm.
there.
They have.
So it's like I've found out things that I could have been doing all along and weren't like just like for example, obviously I've made a warlock. Pact of the Chain lets you summon an imp. Um,
I have a pet quasit that I can summon because I found a thing that you can get to get a quasit. I have a quasit that I summon.
nice.
I'm not a warlock, but I did say that I'm a wizard. But
Yeah, see,
if you,
that's another thing that I didn't realize. Like, I'm pretty sure a Quasit is only summonable by warlocks with Pact of the Chain because it gives you a bigger list of things to summon. But
they
and
they
that
they are, I can only do it because there is a something that I found.
or is it like
I
a is it
found a
not family?
scroll which was like a scroll of summon quasit,
Oh, also
and
not the 5 to 1 million
I
spell.
copied that into my spell book, which now means I can use it as a ritual spell, which I haven't noticed any other ritual spells in the game yet.
Mm.
And he's called Shovel, and he speaks to you the first time you summon him because he belonged to. I think he belonged to the guy who was either on the run from or he was a red wizard of Thay. And you find
Oh
the
yeah,
necromancer with the necromancer book if you find that. It was all around there somewhere.
I did find the book. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's interesting. But the point I was going to make is
Sorry,
that
go on.
you have to sacrifice one of your own attacks to attack with your pet in the warlock rules because they're quite outdated. Whereas with a lot of the newer classes like the artificers, steel guardian, steel defender, sorry, the drake wardens, drake pet if you're a ranger, they act on your bonus action, and a lot of the newer summoning spells also work that way. Use your bonus action to tell that thing to attack. But even then, in Baldur's Gate, it just gets its own turn. You don't have to expend any resources of your own to make it attack, and it also gains multi-attack at level 5.
Oh, that's cool.
So, so my imp can hit twice, as well as me going Eldritch Blast twice. So it's yeah, it's a lot more effective, which I've found very interesting. And then there's other things like you can cast bonus action spells and regular spells on the same turn and stuff like that, which is, I think has the potential to
It's good
trip
for
up
the
some new
game.
players.
It's not. I would never recommend it in actual Dungeons and Dragons. There are
Yeah,
certain things that were are that you can take from the game that you maybe could apply. A lot of it I wouldn't. I think it shifts the balance of the entire game and the experience, and messes with sort of turn economy. Is that the right phrase? Yes.
yeah,
Action economy. That's one. However, in a video game, and especially one where it is, I think it's far more punishing than I am to my own players. It is a
yeah. It's a
punishing
very
game.
punishing game.
It is cool to be able to, as I did in the early hours of the morning, be surrounded by undead crows, misty step out of out of it, and then fireball it. It was great.
Yes,
It was great.
that is yeah, that is a fun thing. Yeah, I think it works. I think my main worry, I know we're nearly at time, but I think my main worry is that it might have a similar effect to what we call the Matt Mercer effect, which is not
Mm,
something I'm going to spend a long time explaining, but it basically means that people expect the games at their table to be the same as um, Critical Role, or in
mm,
this case, expect the rules to work the same as they play on Baldur's Gate 3. It was a big problem when I was much younger as a teenager and I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards and expected the rules to work like they did in the cartoon or the anime or whatever you want to call it, and they definitely didn't. Um, and it caused some
mm.
disconnect and confusion, and I worry that that might happen. But again, it is
Lesson
what it
learned.
is.
I,
The game is still fantastic. I'm still enjoying every minute of it.
I'm yeah really enjoying it. I have that same issue I had with a lot of sort of open worldy. So it's not fully open world, but things where I feel I have to complete everything before I move on. And
Yeah,
it got to a point where I was in the first area, where the forest or whatever it is, where I was just like, I'm gonna get annoyed at this game if I don't just focus on the main story.
yeah,
Because there's parts of the map I haven't been to. I can see the dark patch in the corner, and I'm just gonna get annoyed myself if I go there. So I'm just gonna focus on playing the game, the main story, and going through that. And I still do side quests. Like I pretty much think I did everything I could do in the Underdark. I don't think there's anything. There's maybe one thing that I didn't do because I don't know. I think it's one of the things where you get a mission halfway through it. If that
yeah.
makes sense. So that you discover something that is meant for a mission or for a quest. So I found some bark from a tree,
I did that. Yeah.
and it refers to a quest that I haven't got. So I'm really
Oh, have you not
confused.
picked that quest up?
I don't know. I I think it's something to do with the Adamantine Forge, but I don't know.
I'll tell you about it later. It's
Cool.
it's not a big deal.
That's fine. But I got it
So
from when I killed all the hook horrors.
yeah,
And
it's near the branches of the tree. Yeah,
yeah,
but there's hookers everywhere. Yeah,
yeah. But
nice,
yes,
nice fights.
I'm very much enjoying the game. I am glad that I got it early, a little bit early,
Tiny bit.
with the deluxe edition or whatever it was. It was worth it. Um, it is unhealthy for me because I played it for like 8 hours yesterday. I think it was a long time. Um, but it's fun and I like it, and I think it could be talked about in its own separate podcast, and maybe we'll have to give more time to it later on once we've maybe played it or we've played the multiplayer a little bit. We can talk about it a bit more in detail because we have not completed it. We just have our first taste as we're now into the Act 2 or whatever it is, where you go to the Shadow Curse 2 or 3.
Don't even know how many acts there are in the game.
I would say 5, but like I doubt it.
Maybe three, maybe four. I don't know.
Who knows? Either way, I think we've come to our end point. I said we're doing a slightly shorter version this week as we sort of test out lengths of podcast, trying to see which one is the best for us, but also for you guys watching. Because listening to us talk for 2 hours might be a bit much for some people.
Mm,
So we're looking at an hour. Well, I think maybe an hour and a half might be better for us.
we can try
Um,
that next week.
but we can try that. We might try that next week. So, but we will bid you farewell and good night. Please go on YouTube, watch last week's podcast. It's up there. Then the second one will be on there tomorrow on YouTube. That's just Awkward the Big Dice on YouTube. I'm trying to do shorts. I've done one so far. I'm experimenting and still learning. You have to listen to your own voice a lot to be able to pick out the good moments, but I think with a short one it should be easier. And then also check us out on Instagram and on Twitter, and then please follow us on Twitch.
It all helps.
That's everything I think we're on for the time being.
If you find us somewhere else, I'm sure follow us too.
So
It's always appreciated.
yeah.
Let us know. And feel free to comment,
Mhm.
suggest topics that we'll talk about another time, um, or what you liked, what you didn't like.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for your time. We'll see you all
Thank you.
next week.